Kita na po ho? Okay. Ayan
Yes.
po. A good day to all of you present in this meet. Before we begin, let us greet. Let us start with this program with a prayer to be led by Charisse Delgado.
Let us feel the presence of the Lord as we humble ourselves before Him in prayer. Father God, we praise you for another day that you have blessed each and every one of us. Thank you for allowing us to be here and participate in our first work immersion. We also praise you, Father, for the people behind who made this program possible. Help my classmates, O Lord, that they may be focused and that you may grant them knowledge and understanding on the new learnings we will witness and hear today. We pray for our guest speaker that you alone will glorify him with strength and wisdom as he speaks to us today. We praise you, O Lord, for providing us this day to discover and grasp new ideas. We lift up to you our prayers and thanksgiving. In Jesus' mighty name, amen.
Ayan, good morning mga kapwa ABM. I'm John Julan Elroy.
And I am Charisse Delgado, and we are your hosts for this week's program, along with our subject teacher, Ma'am Normina Aglibut, and our guest speaker will be introduced to you shortly.
We look for your utmost attentiveness and presence as we will be having a guest speaker that will discuss the appropriate analysis, framework, and methodology in choosing a product, which would help us guide with our future endeavors. Now, allow us to introduce our guest speaker for today.
So, our guest speaker for today completed his Doctor of Business Administration and graduated magna cum laude and class valedictorian from the Colegio de San Juan de Letran, Manila. He completed his Bachelor of Science in Biology from the University of the Philippines, Visayas. He is an experienced senior and executive leader in the service industry with a demonstrated history of working in the outsourcing or offshoring industry for almost 18 years.
Not only that, but he is also a certified Six Sigma Yellow Belt and skilled in service delivery, business planning, operations management, coaching, and customer relationship management, or CRM. He considers teaching as a vocation. And he is currently a part-time faculty at the Trinity University of Asia, Lyceum Philippines University, and UST Angelicum College. Please welcome Mr. Irvin R. Perono.
Good morning. Thank you, Charisse and Julian. Ma'am NA, thank you so much for this opportunity. So when I was, when the dean called me, then Dean V, I was actually driving, going to another site. So at first, I thought it was about the teaching load, but it was about the talk that I will be giving today. So we were actually discussing over the phone what was the talk all about, and she said the only thing that I remember is feasibility study. And then when I read the invite, actually it's I think one of your publication materials. I saw that it has something to do with the method choosing the right product. So it's nice to share my knowledge when it comes to what are the tools that we will be using, the framework. But for today, I will be focusing on what are the market research method, market analysis, and then demand analysis that we will be using. Because when we talk about feasibility study, it's not just you just do the survey, but it's very important as well that when you do the survey, you have to do it somehow accurately. And one of the key things that you have to do is to have a very good survey questionnaires. And today I will be covering as well what are the things that you have to indicate or include in your survey questionnaire, and then what are the approach that you need to do. Okay, so feasibility study, it's not just again about interview, but you also have to do the demand or the forecast analysis for you to be able to create the budget. That's where the income statement will also be coming into play. And your basis will be the market analysis or the survey that you will be doing. And then after that, if you have all the information already, then definitely you can start your demand forecast, and then how much is your expected probably net income. Will you be gaining out of it if you will do it on your first year, second year, so on and so forth? So let me share the screen first for my today's presentation. I hope everyone had their breakfast and coffee at least. Okay, so let me just share my presentation. All right, so is everyone able to see my screen or what's on the screen?
Yes po, kitang-kita po.
All right, so nice. Okay, so this is just basic guide in feasibility study, and the topic that I will be focusing is about market research methodology and then market analysis. As I've mentioned earlier, we will be focusing on how to create a survey questionnaire. What are the variables that you have to include, the important factors that you need to include. Okay, just give me a minute. I just have to get my charger because I'm about to go bat empty my laptop. Sorry, guys.
Sir Irvin, puwede po ba mag-ask ako ng question?
Sige po, ma'am.
Sir, for example, para po sa kanila 'no, kasi they don't know pa the product na they're going to parang nagge-generate pa sila ng idea. Does it mean po ba na nakapag-market research po ba, eh,
Mm,
kailangan meron na silang, meaning yung talagang product na o puwede naman
okay.
kahit hindi, idea pa lang?
Yeah. So there are two approach when we talk about feasibility study. So you have the market development approach and then you have the product development approach. So if you wanted to check in the market what are the feasible business that you wanted or feasible product, you do the market analysis approach. But if you wanted to test the product that you created, you go for product development first. Okay, so those are the two things that you have to do when it comes to the feasibility study. So when we talk about the product approach, you have to check is the product feasible to be in the market. So you have to create your prototype and you have to test it. Whereas if you wanted to create a market, so you do your market analysis first. Say for example, if you wanted to go venture into milk tea, right? So is it feasible in your area? So that milk tea is already existing, that was developed. So that's market analysis approach or the market demand analysis approach. And then the other one is the product development approach.
Thank you po.
Sure po. All right. So now again, as defined or discussed earlier, right? By definition, feasibility study is, as the name suggests, is designed to reveal whether a project or a plan is feasible. So it is basically an assessment of the practicality of the proposed project plan. Now, a feasibility study is just a part of the initial design of the stage of a project or a plan. So you cannot just proceed to your project or a plan or anything that you wanted to do when it comes to the business if you don't have any basis. And your first part is the feasibility study, which is part of the initial design. So it is actually conducted, if we look at it, in order to objectively uncover the strengths and weaknesses of the proposed project or an existing business. So as I shared earlier, based from the question of Ma'am NA, you can go either product development or market demand analysis, right? So it can help to identify actually and assess opportunities and threats as well. So when we talk about the strength and weaknesses and then the opportunities and threats, part of the feasibility study is for you to do your macro environment and micro environment analysis. So when we talk about your macro and micro analysis, this is where you have to use the pestle analysis, the Porter's five forces, wherein you have to look into those data. So that's the quantitative part of your research or feasibility study. And you also have the qualitative part, which is research or survey that we will be doing. Because you need to quantify how many customers you will be getting in the market based from the demographics. What's the percentage of share? Do you have any other competitors? The frequency of buying or the buying behaviors, which later on we will be discussing further. right? So let me know if you have any questions. Okay, so why do we need to conduct feasibility study? So this is one of the questions probably that um, kept on playing in your mind because of the topic today. So feasibility studies examine the market, including the potential market, if there is an availability when it comes to the product or service that you will be creating, your competitors, again, the potential production in or operational cost and revenue, and other requirements for business opportunity. So it's a good practice when you conduct a feasibility study because you will examine if your business potentially will be successful in the future. And it gives focus to the project or the outline of the alternatives. So if plan A will not work, then what's going to be your plan B, plan C, so on and so forth. And then it narrows the business alternatives, right? What are the resources that we have? Do we have enough to cover if we will go for plan A, if we go for plan B? It all will also help us identify opportunities through the investigation process. Because when you create the feasibility study, you get to see what are the flaws or the consequences, probably, and what are the advantages or the disadvantages of the product or the service that you will be offering to the market. So you will see there and then. So from there, oh, in example, your product pala that you've developed is something that's just for Generation Z, and you wanted to put it or introduce it in a certain area in Metro Manila. However, when you found out during your market research, you found out that the population of Gen Z is only 20% and 80% are baby boomers probably and Generation Alpha. So that's one of the things that you have to take into consideration. So will you go for it considering that in that area there's only 20% of your target market or consumers versus 80% which are Generation Alpha or baby boomers. So that's just an example. Why is it that you need to conduct a feasibility study for you to be able to identify right there and then what are the consequences or the advantages and then disadvantages. Now, so as discussed earlier, we will be talking about marketing feasibility. So what is a marketing feasibility? A feasibility study that seeks to understand the market potential of the product in a particular market to identify the success of the market opportunity. So meaning to say, is there any market potential in your area or with a product or service that you wanted to introduce to your consumers, right? By doing the marketing feasibility will help you understand the success of your market opportunity, meaning to say, what is the market share of your consumers if ever that you will introduce a certain product or a certain service in a certain area? Will it be successful, right? What's going to be the success rate? What's the probability that your consumer will be taking advantage of your product? Now, the marketing aspect of the project feasibility, it will help you identify potential markets. As what I've mentioned earlier, potential markets, this is basically dependent on the demographics. So do you have the target market? Market competition, meaning to say, is the market saturated already, right? So when we talk about market saturation, as I've mentioned earlier, you have to do also your macro and micro environment analysis or environmental scanning. So with that, you would know, is there any competitive rivalry, right? So using Porter's five forces analysis, remember the competitive rivalry will help you identify, is the market saturated? Are there a lot of competitors in the area already? Now, if it is high, okay, meaning to say, if the competitive rivalry is very high in your area, then definitely that's something that you have to consider. And that will help you validate as well with the qualitative or quantitative data that you have, right? Are there any potential market that you can develop in the area? And it will also help you evaluate the business idea, right? So would you like to go for what was planned originally, or do you want to switch it or try to tailor fit it? What is the need of the customer? Probably you started with a milk tea market research or feasibility, right? So you wanted to introduce milk tea in a certain area. However, when you created your research, marketing research, you found out that only 10% of the people in the area wanted to take advantage of the milk tea, but rather you found out that they wanted to say take advantage of silog, right? So from that perspective, you would know already, will I go for this specific business or will I switch based from what I found out? So data or facts are very important in doing feasibility study. And marketing feasibility is one way for you to be able to identify what are your data or what are the data that's needed and what are the variables that you have to take into consideration. Okay? So any questions? All right. So moving on. So actually, if we look at it, when we talk about the marketing aspect component of feasibility study, these are just some of those that you have to take into consideration. Market research methodology. This is one of the things that we will be discussing further. Environmental scanning, as I've discussed earlier, your macro environment, your external environment, and then your micro environment. Microenvironment, this refers to the company. What are the things happening inside the company, probability that may impact the business as a whole? So again, as I mentioned, here you will be doing your um, pest analysis, your political, environmental, social, technological, economic, and legal factors that may impact the business. You need to do as well your Porter's five forces analysis to check if, say, for example, the threat of the new entrants or substitute is high, low, or weak, and then your market analysis. Sales projection is another aspect which we will not be tackling because probably it will take uh, how many days? Probably another session for sales projection and then the marketing 4P strategy as well. So your pricing, product, promotion, and then your marketing assumption. So this is just basically the aspect of or component of the marketing aspect. Now, when we talk about feasibility study, it's not just about, again, creating the demand, right, or the income statement, but there's a lot of things that you need to consider. So, in doing the market research methodology, you have the research design, probably your statistical treatment. So, what are the statistical analysis that you will be doing? What's the sampling technique? Based from the sample population, will you go for a random sampling? Will you go for a purposive sampling in that case? So research instrument that you will be using, the survey questionnaire, which we will be discussing in a few. Again, your demand and supply analysis, that's your sales projection. And then your product pricing, placement, and then the promotion strategies, your four Ps. Now, let's talk about market research methodology. So market research methodology basically involves creating the survey questionnaire. So by definition, it refers to the parameters, techniques, and approaches used for market research to evaluate the market feasibility of a new product or service. So here, you just don't look at the product in itself or create the product right away. Or probably, if you created the product, you wanted to test if the consumers or if the market will take advantage or will buy your product or service that you are introducing into the market. So market research actually allows the researcher to identify the viability. Take note of the term here, viability, of the proposed product or service through research conducted directly with potential customers. When we talk about viability, is it possible, right? So from the definition, viability means, is there a potential that this product or what you are conducting will be successful, right? Wherein consumers or your potential customers will take advantage of your product. And of course, the result of the findings will help you or the researcher discovered the target market's behavior with the information that was or were gathered based from the opinion and interest about the proposed product or service. So later on, the opinion and interest, how are you going to measure it in a survey, right? So there should be a specific question that you have to create in your market research methodology. Now, the survey questionnaires actually should include four aspects, right? So the buying intention. Are you willing to buy? Or the willingness to buy of the product when it comes to your consumers. Second is the buying frequency. How often are you willing to buy? And this is also your frequency scale. Is it once, twice, once a year, twice a year? So, and then the buying power. This refers to the price scale range, 0 to 1,000, probably 1,001 to 2,000. This is the price scale range. And then the consumer preference, the product or service mix. Which product or service are you willing to avail based on what you are trying to achieve or present into the market when it comes to the product or the service that you are having, right? Now, some things that you have to consider in creating a survey as well, right? So these variables should be included as well. So the demographics, that includes the age, probably, generation, income, gender, education of the respondents, probably the industry. So demographics is very important here because you would know, right? If you wanted to get the percentage, what's the age range probably, right? Or which of the generation prefer the product that you are going to introduce into the market. Okay, when we talk about brand preference, what are the brands do they prefer? Okay, so at least you can look into the differences or the success or the features, successful features of other brands or services that's in the market that you can also take into consideration. Do you need to create a unique feature of the service or the product that you will be offering in the market? And then you also have word of mouth, right? This is where you have to ask your consumer, will you recommend the product? Okay. And then you also have consumer awareness. Are you aware of this product? So are they even using the product or do they have the knowledge about the product? So if they say no or 80% will say no, then that's a signal for you that you need to create consumer awareness if that product will be feasible in the market as well. User status basically is by asking your respondents if they own or use similar products or service that you will be introducing into the market. And then you also have technographics. Which platform do you prefer to buy the product or service that you will be offering? Will it be Instagram? Will it be Facebook? Or will it be probably a website that you will be creating? So technographics refers to the technology or the platform wherein you will be selling your product or your consumer wanted to check on your product so they can purchase it aside from the physical store, of course, right? And then usage rate, this is basically asking your consumers how often do they use the product. So these are the some of the variables that you should be including as well in your survey questionnaire when you create your market research. Now, here are some of the example, right? Now, of the sample choices when you create a survey questionnaire. So when we talk about buying intention, the question that you will be putting there is, are you willing to buy? Then the choices will be willing to buy, not willing to buy, or yes or no. If we talk about buying power, how much are you willing to pay? So you provide already the range of the prices depending on your projected price. So 0 to 499, 500, 1,500 to 1,099. And then buying frequency, how often are you willing to buy? So is it once a year, twice a year, monthly, once a week, every day? And then when we talk about technographic, which platform do you prefer to buy our product or services? As I've mentioned, will it be through Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, website, mobile app? And then user status, do you own or use similar product? Yes or no? So when we talk about user status here, you would know right away. Say, for example, the percentage of the respondents using the certain product is 80%. So that's a huge market that you have already, right? So these are the sample questions with sample choices that you need to include when you are doing your market research, and specifically the survey questionnaire, right? Now, you might be asking, Sir Irvin, how are we going to identify the sample size? Right? Say, for example, in Metro Manila, you have 8 million population, or probably in my area, there's 700,000 population. Do I need to do the research or survey all those 700,000 for me to be able to come up with that specific outcome with the survey questionnaire? Of course not. There are ways for you and methods on how to get your sample size. So, probably Sloven's formula is already the what we were used to, or what we used before. But in technological advancement, there's a lot of ways that you can get the sample, or how many respondents you just need from out of the population that you have. Okay, and there's a lot of online sample size calculator that you can take advantage. So the first one is the Yamane sample size formula. So this is a way to identify or determine the sample size for the study. Actually, this is ideal to use when the only thing you know about the product is the underlying population. So here, this is if you wanted to get the 95% confidence interval, or just the 5% error rate with your sample size. Okay? And then you have the Critchley-Morgan sample size formula. This is used to select a sample from within a general population to simplify the process of identifying the sample size for a finite population. Here, in this formula, you have a table already that you can look into. Say, for example, if your total population is 75,000. Now, out of that 75,000 population that you have, what will be your sample size? So, in the table, it will give you 382. And then if it is 1 million, that's 384. Actually, a sample size that's around 380 plus, that's where it's ranging, depending on the number of population, or the population size that you have. Of course, if the population is only 10 or 20, probably you can just do 100% random sampling, or 100% sampling when it comes to that. So it's more of a purposive sampling already, because your sample size is also your population. And then you also have the Cochrane formula, allows you to calculate an ideal sample size given a desired level of precision, desired confidence level, and then the estimated proportion of the attribute present in the population. And then the G power is also another one, a tool to compute statistical power analysis for many different tests. Here, actually, there is an online tool, guys, calculator that you can just look into. And then you can just enter the sample size. Say, for example, the 75,000. And then when you just have to identify what's the error rate that you wanted. Say it's 5%. And then you just have to click OK, and then it will give you what's going to be your accepted sample size. So try to check some of these, because these are online that you can look into. You also have SurveyMonkey, a sample size calculator, wherein you just have to enter again the population, and then it will give you the number of the sample that you need to take for your survey to be valid. And again, you have to put there the error rate, if it is 5% or 10%, or the confidence interval. So confidence interval is just probably, if you're 5% error rate, then that's 95% confidence interval. Okay, so we also have RAWSoft. That's another one that I did not include this. So if you check online, a RAWSoft calculator, that's another way for you to get your sample size. So it will also lead you to get what's the acceptable sample size. So in doing research, more or less, this is similar approach, even with the business research that we are doing. So similar approach when we use the sample size calculator. Now, we're done with the market research method. So do you have any questions so far on how you will be crafting your survey questionnaire? Okay, so clear. I hope that it's not an information overload as early as now. So if ever that you wanted to do your feasibility study, do you have a product in mind already that you wanted to do? Just type in your answer in the message box. So do you have in mind, who knows, that product will be very successful and well known? It's either product or service that you wanted to introduce into the market. None yet? Are they done na, ma'am, with the feasibility study as well?
Not yet pa po. We are still in the ano pa po, in generating idea pa lang.
Okay. Oh, idea generation. Okay,
Yeah.
that's good.
Mhm, mhm,
So that's good. At least once you have that idea, then those information on how to do the market research will be very useful. Why? Because those variables you need to calculate, right? And based from the sample size that's given, you will be able to identify what's going to be your potential demand and supply that you will have for your product or services. So that's the essence of the market research survey and why it is very important. It is the foundation also of your feasibility study. Without it, you cannot just be blinded working on something without knowing what's your market, what's going to be your demand, what's the demand, potential demand, what's going to be your potential supply, what's going to be your potential market. So always remember that. Okay, so I think that's one part, or the first part, when we talk about the market research. So we move on to the next will be, now you're done with the survey. What are you going to do with the data? Right? So it's not just you did the survey already, you have the data, and that's it. You have to process the data. And that's where your market survey analysis is coming into play. So when we talk about the market survey analysis, it involves analyzing a given market in order to gain insight into the buying potential and attributes of the target audience for a product or services. Again, this is where your consumers, the output or the preference, right, the demographics, whatever you have in your market research, you have to make sure that you have all the information for you to be able to create the market survey analysis. So, what are the important variables that you have to take into consideration? So, the very first one is the population, of course. Who are your target consumers? Is it the entire, say, probably barangay or municipality or city? Or will you just be targeting probably a certain generation? Or probably you're just targeting those who are in a private sector working in, say, banking industry, right? So that's your population. You also have your market segment. Yes, is someone
Ako
uh,
po.
yes, ma'am.
Question, sir, sorry as to cut you off. Sir Irvin, some of my students kasi before, bakit yung variables na lagi nilang sinasabi for all? For example, they want to place, I mean, to sell their products and service through online lang. Is it possible po na sabihin lang na online?
Yeah, it is. If That's
Mhm,
why in the survey questionnaire earlier, there is a question when we talk about technographics.
mhm.
So you would know there what's the preference of your consumer if they wanted it via Facebook or online. So it's really possible. But when we talk about population, of course, it depends on what's your product. Are you going to cater teenagers, or are you going to cater probably toddlers? If it is yung sa mga damit, right? If it is food, probably who are your target market? So are these diet conscious people because your food is more of an organic part or more of a dietary needs of the people around? That's how you do it. If you wanted to say for example in a certain area, Metro Manila, then what you have to know what's the total population in Metro Manila, and then that's where you have to get your sample size. Say your total sample size after you computed it is only 300 respondents. So that's your sample size out of your total population, which is the total um, residents in Metro Manila. And if you wanted to limit it, you have to be specific because the population in Metro Manila includes everyone, including babies, right? But if you just wanted to get like say 18 years old to 50 years old, right? So that's just your target population. And when you create your survey, then your target respondents will be just between 18 to 50 years old. You can narrow it down as well. Do you just wanted to get or get the response coming from a specific industry, say in a BPO industry only? So your target population will be those working in a BPO industry. The age range will be within 18 to 50 years old, right? And from there, based from the response that they have, you can get already the percentage of how many respondents or what percentage of the respondents would like to take advantage of your product. And from there, you would know what's going to be your potential demand or consumers. You have, say, for example, you got only 20% said yes. So what's the total population that you got in a BPO industry that's 18 to 50 years old? And then you multiply it with a percentage, then you will be getting the potential customers or consumers that you will have based from the result of the survey.
Thank
Did
you
I
po.
answer your question po,
Yes
ma'am?
pa. Thank you
Okay.
po.
All right. So again, market segment, these are the demographic profile of your target market. As I've mentioned, will you just be limiting it to a certain generation? Will you just be limiting it for those working during mall hours? Will you just be limiting it to the students, right? Because students now are the mode of learning are online, like what we're doing right now. So if your product is a gadget that will help online learning, right? So that's example of your market segment. You have to know as well the demographic profile of your target market. And then you also have your market survey, the result of your market research. So that's very important as I was discussing earlier. Okay, now when we do the demand projection, so demand projection, actually, this is where you identify the number of potential consumers for a product or service in a target market. And also, this is being used by or companies to analyze and identify the successful market and be able to generate expected profits to expand their business operations. And when we talk about demand projection, you have to understand the market. What are the potential demand that can help the companies or business identify the viability, and do you need to invest right out of what was the result of your research on which specific market. Now there are actually approach that you have to consider, different approach when we talk about demand projection. So you have your demand and supply analysis. You also have your market survey analysis and then demand forecasting. So when we talk about demand and supply analysis, you have your projection. How much will be the supply that you will be um, producing? And then what's the market gap? So out of your demand and supply, this is your supply, and then versus your demand. Then if you subtract your demand to the supply, then that's the market gap that you will be getting. So that's something that you will also be supplying into the market. You have to find out what's the gap, right? And that's where you will come in, wherein this is the total number of product that you will be producing, because this is the gap in the market. So there is really a need for you to create the product or introduce a certain service because there is a gap, right? And then when we talk about the market survey analysis, you have the population, the market segmentation, your survey descriptive result, what happened, what percentage of the consumers wanted to purchase the product, what's the frequency that they wanted to purchase the product, right? And then you have the demand analysis. Now, when we talk about forecasting basically, or the demand forecasting, it's basically a field of predictive analytics that you have to consider, which tries to understand and predict customer demand to optimize the supply decision. This is by corporate supply chain and business management. So this method actually are divided into two categories. So you have the quantitative and qualitative. Now, quantitative, as what I've mentioned earlier, this is more on your environmental scanning, your macro environment and your micro environment. While your qualitative, this is your survey questionnaire that we've discussed earlier. Okay, so let's talk about your demand and supply analysis. What are the things that you have to consider? So if we look at it, the approach basically is to identify the potential demand of the product according to the estimated total demand and estimated supply by deducting the total demand to the supply. So this is what I was talking earlier about the gap analysis. So it's going to be the total annual demand minus the total supply that you'll have, then that's going to be your total gap. Now, the gap represents the remaining demand for the proposed business. So, ito yung pupunuan mo. This is the one wherein you have to look into, right? Based on your demand and supply analysis. So, there are factors also that you have to consider here in your demand and supply analysis. You have your product supply, which is the number of available products being supplied in the market space. And then you have your product demand, the number of people who consume the product in a particular market space, and then the demand, the potential demand that the company can capture. Now you might be asking a question, sir, how are we going to get this data? Right, going back, I don't know why I used milk tea. Going back to my example earlier, milk tea, sir, where can we get the product supply? Where can we get the product demand? Where can we get the market demand? We only have the survey, right? There are websites that you can get the information, right? So if you wanted to get your sample population, say for example, you have the National Statistics Office or our PSA, the Philippine Statistics Authority, where you can get the population in a certain area with their age range. But when we talk about product supply or demand, product supply or product demand in market demand, so you also have the worldpopulation.com. That's another way of getting the data. You also have the populationstat.com. And if you wanted to get some trends as well, you have the macrotrends.net. And then locally here in our country, if you wanted to get the information about the demographics, probably, actually guys, in Philippine Statistics Authority website, if you will look at it, it's not just about the population that you will be getting, but you will also see there the different types of businesses and different products, right? So that's how useful the website of the PSA when we get the demands or the product supply. Sometimes you just have to go to the website or online and then try to search what's the demand or supply, you might not be able to get, say for example, you will not be able to get specific that this is the demand or the supply of the product for a specific period or last year. So sometimes you have to be creative because you cannot find all the information online. So some just a tip for you to be able to get that demand or the supply in the market. What I can suggest for you is some of my students before they did a quick survey actually. Parang, sir, ilang beses po kayo bumibili ng ganito? So they went to the mall and this just stand there and then try to ask random strangers or random mall goers to get the data that they have. And then out, say for example, they have already 100 respondents, then they process it. What percentage of that 100 respondents bought or purchased a certain product, and then they multiply it to the total population. So that's how they got the supply demand if it's not available, because some product you will not really be seeing it in the internet or in the website or on the website that I just mentioned. So you have to be creative in creating that for you to be able to come up with the data in your feasibility study when it comes to the product supply or the product demand. Right? So just a tip that I can give you. All right. So next is things that you need to remember actually when you're doing demand and supply analysis. So you have to identify the population of the market space, which is your demand analysis. You have to filter the population according to the survey result. Again, the demographics that you've included. And supply analysis, here you have to identify the direct and indirect competitors. So who are your direct and indirect competitors? Who are those who are selling the same or similar to your product? And then your indirect competitors, these are uh, business owners or same nature, but technically not similar with the product that you are selling. And then you have to get also the annual estimate for each supply from the competitors for you to have a better understanding of the supply. And then gap analysis, again, this is where you will be coming in. Is there really a need for you to venture into such business or introduce the product? Because the gap will help you identify how many supply is needed in the market based on your demand and supply analysis. So basically, that's demand minus your supply, then you'll get the gap. All right. So in doing a market survey analysis, there are certain variables as well that you need to consider. So you have your demand projection, again, your population, market segmentation, and then your market research result, and then the demand analysis. So if we see it here, population of the target retail area, saan mo ba gustong gawin yung business mo? Where do you plan to put up the business? Who are your target consumers? For the market segment, you have the demographic profile of your target market, right? How many uh, respondents are of legal age? If your product is for mothers, then what's the population or percentage of mothers in your specific area? If your target market is students or are students, so what's the percentage of the students in your area wherein you wanted to have that product or business visible? And then your market survey result, as I've discussed earlier, the components of the survey questionnaires that you need to use in doing your market research or methodology. All right. So, any questions so far? None? Is it too much information? Because I think that covers my presentation for today. I didn't know that it was just a very short presentation for today, guys. So I thought it will be very long, but I was able to discuss it in 45 minutes or less. So now probably if you have questions, I can entertain those questions. If you have, or if there are confusions that you have, then it's time for you to ask questions.
Yeah, habang nagta-type sila, sir, habang nagta-type sila, please text or I mean, chat lang po sa chat box. Grabe Sir Irvin, yun na, parang wow. Sobrang summarize talaga. Ang galing ni Sir Irvin.
I actually, ma'am,
Ah,
I got the idea of what to discuss. I'd like to thank as well Dr. Dotong,
Dr.
because I
Dotto.
got he was one of the speakers in the national conference of PCDEB. So I actually was talking to him last night, and said,
Mhm.
"Doc, what's gonna be the uh, best topics that I can discuss with the students for today?" So yeah, thank you to Dr. Dotto. I tried to summarize everything, but again, this is just some of the aspects of the
Yeah.
feasibility study.
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
Feasibility study, there's still a lot of aspects that's not discussed actually.
But for me, sir, ha, totoo yun po yung sa Sloven's formula. Akala ko po yun lang talaga. So, I found out also in myself talaga na ang dami na pala talagang bagong klase, no? Grabe. Ako po, I was, rin ako, amazed. Wow. How about the others po? Question, any answer po? I know po na very parang nakaka-overwhelm, but then, ihimay-himay natin. Come on. Yan, yan, yan. Okay. Emilio, go ahead.
Hello po. Morning po, sir. Uh, I would like to ask a question now po. So, I have a business plan po, sir. So, for example, it's a digital application that will hopefully solve the problem of unemployment. So, since that application is entirely new, innovative, and hasn't been developed yet, people may not appreciate the potential of the product in their daily lives. So another problem is that the cost of creating that application is beyond our reach. So even though we push through after the feasibility study, we might not be able to generate the product. So sir, I am confident that this product will solve the problem of unemployment. So my question is, would performing a feasibility study be sufficient in light of the fact that people may or may not perceive the product's potential because it is a completely new application, or would it be more efficient if I propose the idea to large companies that develop applications, since I also do not have the budget and tools to develop my idea into a product? Ayan po, sir.
That's well, I would like to say congratulations as early as now you have that idea already. Probably not everyone is inclined to be an entrepreneur, and I like the idea that you said can solve unemployment in the future. So from there, you are already doing your corporate social responsibility, and probably the 12 SDGs of United Nations, which is one of which is unemployment that UN is trying to resolve. Now, two things here, based from my understanding on your question, is it still viable for you to proceed with the feasibility study, considering that not everyone will be able to, or you think that not everyone will be able to take advantage of that application? Second is, you don't have resources to proceed because it's very expensive. Did I get your question, those two questions?
Yes, sir. So, to clarify the first part lang po, sir. Kasi po, sir, what if the results, for example, results of the feasibility study state that they do not need the product,
Uh-uh.
but when they tried the product, the physical product itself, it would turn out that it is actually helpful for them. Parang ganun po,
Mhm.
sir.
All right. So if you will go the route of the feasibility study, and then you found out that the product that you're, or the service that you're going to offer, in this case, you said that it's an online application, will not be feasible for the consumers. I think you have to look into, remember that feasibility study, when you do your market research, you'll be able to find out what went wrong, what went well. You will be able to identify already the potential issues that you identified. So if the result will say that it's not feasible or the consumers will not take advantage of that, you have to rethink, right? What about your product? Why is it that the consumers doesn't want to take advantage of it? Okay? Or what I can do as well, if I'm in your place, is I have to refine the product, and you have already the prototype or the sample of the application that you have. Try to check it and then pitch it for other companies that also probably a software developer or developing such app as well, so they can fund your idea. Again, there's no idea that will put into waste, right? Who knows, that simple idea will be beneficial in the future. And probably people are not just seeing it because they have not seen it yet, or probably how it was presented to your consumers, it was not presented really well to them. So you have did you need to take into consideration as well, since this is an app. Did you try them to use the app that you have, right? Because unlike if you have a food product or probably ready to wear product, then they can see it right away. But in this case, it's an app that you're trying to develop. Probably, who are your potential market for this one? So you have to look into that as well. Are these the developers or the app developers? Because later on, you're going to sell your product, or is this something wherein everyone will have access to it? Because developing an app, really, it requires a lot of money, and probably you need to maintain the app, especially if you're going to introduce it to the market and your target consumers are common people, or just or everyone who can have access to it, right? So I think that's how it. And you said that it's gonna be an app wherein can solve unemployment. So I suppose it is like an online job search. Is it similar to that?
Uh, it's far from it, sir.
I'm
But
sorry. So what's the context of you solving that unemployment? What kind of app is that?
actually, sir, I don't want to say it yet. I want
Okay.
to
All right.
keep it as a secret up until the business proposal.
Okay. I'm good with that. Right. So
I'm
for
sorry po.
confidentiality purpose. No, no, no problem. It's okay. But yeah, those suggestions that I can look into. Probably you have to look into, did you survey the right population or your target market or target consumers? So probably those are the things that you
Yes,
have
sir.
to look into. If it is an app, are your target consumers will be just the common people, like us, probably students that you will be doing the survey, or will you be getting as respondents to your survey, not really the consumers, but these are your developers or the business people, business minded people who can also fund your creativity.
Yes, sir. And
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
mhm.
Ma'am, can I add pa, ma'am?
Oh, go, 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 go.
Actually, sir, you're right po about the formulation of the app. It is very expensive po kasi to develop an app. So if we, for example, develop a prototype, I wouldn't think that it is possible for us to even develop a prototype. So
But
that's my problem po.
yeah, another consideration that you can have that, because the OST, they have that. I'm not sure if that's covered, that they can fund. If you have that idea, you can present it to them, and then once they see that your
Yes.
idea is really good, they can fund that. So that's another one. You also have, there are business pitching contests that's available here in the Philippines. I've attended one, a GA Philippines. It's a business plan competition, right? Who knows, if you're going to join the GA business plan competition, then you present that. You have the prototype already, you have the idea, and you pitch the business really well. That's gonna be an additional help for you in the if they will fund, because when you do the business pitching or when you join, it's the investors actually. If you're watching probably Shark Tank or elevator pitch, so it's just a short business pitch wherein those who has an idea about their business, it's either existing or not yet existing, they get to present it in front of the investors, and they get only 5 minutes to present. And I think that's going to be a good avenue, Emilio, because yeah, developing an app is really expensive, and it takes a lot of maintenance and time and effort as well. So those are just some of my suggestions.
And to add on din 'no, Emilio, as I've said 'no, yung ano naman, yung version ng Filipino is the final pitch. Now we're in last edition, Heroes edition, they're looking for parang ganyan, idea pa lang. So not necessarily startup na, not necessarily as in idea lang. And then Emilio, we have this Trinity naman Trinity community wherein we could develop no that idea. Lalo na ngayon, Sir Irvin, we have ano pala, guys, we have a um, an event wherein you are entitled if you want no to join the business idea. And then nandun lahat yung mga ano natin, mga deans natin, wherein meron tayong mga connections sa Trinity na pwede tayong i-connect. Okay, para ma-develop natin and then ma-pursue natin yung iyong idea. 'Di ba na Sir Ibin? And then yung ano natin,
Yeah.
mentorship, no, doon. Made-develop pa natin yan.
And there's a lot of international competition actually that you can join as well if you wanted to go international. There's a lot of investors actually. So who knows, that product, Emilio, is something really that will be in the market soon, and and I we will just see your name. You're the developer of that. So we'll wait for that time to come.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am.
All right. Any more questions? Yes, Zernilin?
A while ago po dun sa topic ng marketing feasibility, you suggested that we should identify the potential market competition as it helps in evaluating the business idea, campaigns, and trends in the market. What if po yung business mo doesn't have a competitor on your specific chosen location? Would that be a good sign po?
So there are two types of competitors, your direct competitors and indirect competitors. So if it is new and if it's the only product that you have in the location, then definitely that's a good sign because you're the only one. You're the first. You're the first mover. And we have a term in business we call first mover, meaning to say you're the first one. Definitely you'll have that advantage, right? So it's a good sign because you are creating the market, right? So you're doing market development, meaning to say that specific product is not yet available in a specific market, so you develop the market for that specific product, and that's part of your environmental scanning already, your macro environment. So if you don't have any competitor there, then definitely that's a good sign. So meaning to say your a competitive rivalry is low, meaning to say very low that you'll have a competition there. So that's a good sign. And your product will definitely be very visible because it's not yet introduced in a certain market. But of course, there are certain aspect in your market research that you have to consider some of the variables as well. Probably first 2 months, 3 months, or first few years of your product, it probably, if your consumers will not be able to take advantage of that because it's new. So your problem there is how do you market it because that's the first time and you're the only one in that specific area. But that's a good sign if you're the only one. Then you are creating the market for your consumers.
Gets
Did I
po
answer?
sir, thank you po.
No problem. Yes, ma'am.
Sir, how about considering also their indirect competitors? Kasi journaling, 'di ba, we have direct competitors, so meaning talagang yung as in specific or same product, same service. 'Di ba po ganun yung direct? How about the indirect competitors? When you say po ba na indirect competitors, meaning alternative product, tama po ba?
Yeah. Yep. You have to, yes, that's another consideration that you
Relation.
have to look into, because if you don't have a direct competitor, then you have to look into your indirect competitors, because that will definitely be impacting your product. Probably if your product is very expensive, then they might go look into an alternative which probably be available in your indirect competitor. So that's another way of looking at it. If you don't have a direct competitor in the area, then I suggest you look into the indirect competitor, because in one way or another, that will also impact your business.
Yun. So, journaling, maybe no direct competitors, but take into consideration also the indirect competitors, yung mga alternative products. For example, no, sir, yung sa snacks, ang dami palang klaseng snacks. So, baka tulad sa milk tea, may yung coffee, di ba, sir? Kailangan din consider
Yes.
yung coffee, yung water, yung soft drinks. Yun. So, yan. For sure, meron ka pa ring indirect competitors. Okay. Thank you po. More question po. Ang ganda. Ang ganda po. Sino pa pong may question?
Yes, Julian. Ma'am, I'll share with you the ano na lang, the PDF file of this presentation.
Yes pa. Thank you very much po.
Yes, Julian, you have a question.
Sir, about, wait lang, feedback. Ayan po, can you hear me na po?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Ayan po. About po sa area, how do you think, gaano po kalawak yung pwedeng area? Per city po ba? Barangay, ganun po?
Yeah,
Since sa ano po, product po.
yep, depende. It depends on you, where you wanted to introduce your product and where do you want to launch your product or service, probably. So say, for example, your target consumers are just in your barangay. So you just limit it in your barangay. If you wanted the entire city, then the entire city, that's gonna be your population. If it is gonna be in the entire region, then you use entire region as the population, say national capital region. Yeah. So that's how you look at when we talk about area or location. Another way of looking at it, if you just wanted to get into the consumers in a specific industry, right? So if you just wanted to get your consumers population, probably the teachers in Metro Manila. It can be teachers in a public or a public private schools. And so you have to be specific when you do your market research. Can be probably, as what I've mentioned earlier, those employees in the banking industry lang. So specifically in Metro Manila. Okay, so you can do that. That's part of your market segmentation when you do your demographic.
Ayan po, sir. Thank you po. Mas naliwanagan po sa,
No
sa
problem,
question
Julian.
ko po.
Erica.
Hi, sir. So kanina po inas po ni Jer yung about po sa direct competitor. So napaisip din po ako na what if binabaan po ng direct competitor ko yung ano po nila, yung prices nila? Should I necessarily babaan ko rin po ba yung akin, or is it alright naman po na i-retain ko na lang? Pero if ever na i-retain ko po yung prices ko, tapos binabaan po nila yung sa kanila, ano po yung possible disadvantage po sa business ko?
Yeah. So are we talking about if the business is already existing, Erica, or this is something that you're trying to look into pa?
Um, Ano po, existing na po siguro.
Okay. All right. So there are two things that you have to consider if the business, when we talk about competition. So price, yes, drives your consumer, but you also have customer loyalty, wherein it's where the quality of your product or service that you are giving to them. So regardless, your price is very expensive, but the quality is really, really good, then they will purchase your product or take advantage of your service. So say, for example, the luxury cars or luxury bags. So even it's very expensive, there's still a lot of people who's taking advantage of that, especially those who are in the probably um, can afford really to buy those luxury bags. But they're still existing. The business is still existing. They did not lower their prices because they know that there is customer loyalty and then the quality of the product that they have.
Okay po, sir. Then, how about po kapag bago ka pa lang po, like mag-i-start ka pa lang po ng business, and then wala pa po talagang nakakapag-try ng products mo, parang gano'n po.
Sorry. Can you hear me now? I
Ay,
think I
yes
was
po.
disconnected. Yep. So another one wherein you can look into when we talk about price, if you wanted to lower the price, you can also look into the supply chain. So if your current price is higher than your competitor, then look at your supply chain. Is there a way that you need to um, lessen when it comes to the expenses that may impact as well in lowering the price that you have, right? So from the time that you are getting the raw materials up until that you finish a certain product or you provide a certain service, so look at those factors. So himay-himayin mo siya, isa-isahin mo siya. Alin doon ang pwede mo pang bawasan? Do you need to change raw materials para makatipid ka? But you have to take into consideration as well that will sacrifice the product or the quality of the product that you are giving to your consumers or customers. So, from there, ano ba yung mga expenses na malalaki sa business mo na pwede mong i-cut para makatulong for you to lower the price as well and for you to be more competitive? We have what we call the floor and then the ceiling price when it comes to your product, right? So if you go lower that floor price of the product, meaning to say, wala ka nang kikitain. And you also have the maximum because if you go beyond the maximum, that will be very expensive. So try to look at those factors. But of course, there will be advantage and disadvantages that you have to look at to consider as well. Lowering the price, meaning to say you are also probably sacrificing the raw materials and the quality of the product that you have. So that's another thing. Lowering the price may drive also customer loyalty, or probably it can also drive more customer because they find your product lower when it comes to the price comparing it to the competitor. So those are
Ah,
just some of the things that you have to consider.
okay po, sir. Thank you po.
No problem.
Sir Irwin, but na-add ko rin po, 'di ba, Sir Irwin, puwedeng mag-lower 'no, pero parang make sure na yung operating expense mo are parang balance. Baka mamaya bumaba ng sobra ta's mamaya you cannot afford na to pay for your operating expenses. So tama
Correct.
'yun, tama. So kasama rin 'yun sa part ng pag-i-strategy na po, 'wag mag-suffer, mag-compromise. Okay, yun. I-ano mo rin siya, Erica, dapat yung iyong costing, yung mga expenses mo for the month, dapat kayang-kaya niyang bayaran. Ayan. Thank you po. Ayan, may text ano.
Si
Ayan.
Kyle, kunwari po, example, your business has a steady income but you want to slightly make the cost of your products higher. However, if you increase the prices, your business might lose consumers. So what will you do? This is where a dilemma wherein you need to make a decision, right? Will you go for a profit or will you go for customer loyalty, right? So if your consumers are loyal, then definitely and probably you explain why you need to increase the price. There should always be a reason why you wanted to increase the price, right? It's not just you wanted to increase the price because of increasing it. So sometimes a little explanation why you increase the price will help as well them better understand, and because you did not sacrifice the quality of your product, then you still retain your consumers. So that's one way of looking at it. Now, if you wanted to increase the price just for the sake of getting a lot of profit, guys, probably something that I would always tell my people, right? Doing business is not just about the profit, but doing business is for you to be able to help the people. That's why your business is existing, because the main purpose, aside from getting the profit, is for you to help the society, right? Is for you to help the people around you. Now you always have to consider, is it worth it, right? That are you still being humane? Are you still helping, or are you still going back to the reason why your business is existing, and that is to help the community or the society to be better, right? So you always have to look into that, because some businesses, let's if we look at it, they're just aiming for the profit without considering the impact to other people, the impact to the society, the impact to the environment. And as young entrepreneurs, as me, as your speaker today, my heart really goes into the people, into those businesses who are helping the society and other people to make their lives better as well. So always remember that when you do your business, you have to look into it. What's the positive impact that you will be contributing to the society? Not just to your family, to yourself, but to the people around you, to your employees, to your consumers. Will it be better? Will it be beneficial? If you increase the price, what's in it for you? What's in it for the people? What's in it for your consumers? Right? You increase the price for the business to survive, probably, right? And that's given. But you have to be able to explain it to your consumers. Why did you increase the price? Why it's happening? Why did you do this? Why did you do that? And I think that they will understand. In considering right now in the pandemic, right? Everything went up. Prices of everything went up. So they understand, and they would understand. And it would be dependent on the circumstances, right, that you are into. If you're losing the business and you wanted to increase the price and that's reasonable, then do it, right? Choose what you think is right. There's sometimes choose the lesser evil, but still don't forget to choose what's right. Just one thing to share. I hope, Kyle, I was able to answer your question. Cherise, you have a question.
Yes po, sir. Hindi ko po alam kung medyo nasagot na po. Pero, is it recommendable po na mag-sell to a different area when you're selling an in-demand product? Like, yung parang example niyo po na, halimbawa yung milk tea po. If no po, paano po kaya magiging possible na makapag-effectively sell ng ganong product sa isang area po? Ganun.
That's a good question. So remember your gap analysis that I've mentioned earlier. So you have to know how many is the gap when it comes to the supply. So that's one of your bases for you to be able to know if you still wanted to pursue with that. But your next question is, what if the market in your area is already saturated? Ang dami ng milk tea, tabi-tabi pa. So, how can you make it more effective? Probably one way for you is to diversify your product, right? You're not just selling milk tea alone. But why don't you also add, probably kung wala pang nagbebenta ng milk tea tapos meron ka ring sandwich, right? So you create that demand for your consumer. So probably pwede ka ring milk tea tapos meron ka ring binibenta, yung store mo ay hindi lang milk tea, meron ka ring silog, right? So, milk tea, pag may pagkain, may kinakain ang consumer nyo, definitely, kailangan may iniinom siya. So, if it's not yet available, then create that market or demand, right? You'll be the one to create that demand or market in your area. And that will set you apart. Kasi hindi lang milk tea probably ang siniservice nyo. Or probably milk tea ka, pero nandun din yung nagsiserve ka rin sa mga consumers mo na meron ka rin, pwede ka ring nails pa, 'di ba? Sa tabi, right? Habang nagpapaspa sila, pwede silang uminom ng milk tea or umorder or nagre-relax, 'di ba? So that just an example for that. So what I meant is diversify your product probably and offer something that's unique that they cannot find in other competitors, right? So that's one way for you to do it, Charisse. That's just me giving that suggestion.
Okay po, sir. Ganun po. Sige, thank you po.
No problem. Yes, Demi.
Hi, sir.
Yep.
Napapaisip lang po ako since napapag-usapan na po natin yung location.
Ano ang nasa isip mo? Sige, share mo sa amin.
During this time po na marami na pong online shops, do you think it's okay po to have a shop na online-based lang or better pa din po that you have a physical shop?
Mm. So, how would I say this? Physical store, because of the pandemic, is not at all, or was somehow not really totally erased, but hindi siya naging popular because online everything is in there, right? Having the physical store, you have to look into as well when it comes to the expenses, because when you have a physical store, you have to maintain your electricity, right? The people who will be manning the store, your water consumption, probably the maintenance over all the utilities that you'll have. So look at that perspective when it comes to the expenses. And at the same time, look at also the demand of your consumers or the feedback. Do they really wanted to have a physical store, right? Or are they contented when it comes to your online store alone? So those two considerations probably you can look into. There are consumers like shopping malls are now open. They are wanted to visit because they wanted to see the real item or the actual product or the item. So that in that case, then definitely physical store is still okay. But then again, there's cost entailed to that that you need to consider as well, and probably you bake it in your pricing. Whereas if it is online, you don't have to pay anything utilities for your physical store. Probably just a business permit if it's needed when it comes to your online store. But there's a lot of online businesses, even students. I have students from other schools as well that they do online selling, and they use Facebook, Instagram as their platform to sell their products. And probably it depends as well on the nature of business that you have, Demi. If it is just if it's not a restaurant, right? So technically you don't need a physical store. You need a physical store or a rest because it's a restaurant. But there are some food delivery app na rin naman that's available online. So actually, my answer to that is dependent on the demand of the customer and probably the feedback that they wanted to have, and then you have to consider as well the cost. Can you afford to have a physical store given the nature of business that you have? So those are just few things that I can give as an answer to your question.
Thank you po, sir.
Ashley?
Ayan, sir. May question lang din po ako, sir, regarding naman po to sa may survey questionnaire, sir. What if my target audience po are on province or rural area po? What survey process po is more preferable? Parang personal interview po ba sa mga respondents or parang online survey? Kasi po, sir, karamihan po kasi sa mga sa probinsya parang hindi gaano gumagamit ng mga gadgets ganun, sir, like farmers, for example. Ayun, sir.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what you can do if, kasi minsan, especially with the dialect, 'di ba? So that's also another consideration that you have to look into the dialect. There are survey questionnaires that you need to translate it into uh, their own dialect. Say if it is a Cebuano or Ilocano, so you have to translate your survey questionnaire into their dialect for them to be able to understand it better if you will not be present there physically. So another one that you can do is if, well, online, if online is not possible, Zoom, Google Meet, so on and so forth, if it is not possible, what you can do is you can go there physically and do a face-to-face interview. If it's not possible, if the face-to-face interview or survey is not possible, then you ask someone, right, that you can trust and would know what is the objective and how to conduct the survey or the interview that you wanted to have, and probably ask that someone to do the face-to-face interview if you will not be available, and then just record it. So you can just review the recording, whether it's online or there's a camera or a recorder, voice recorder. So those are just some of the suggestions that I can do for you to make it possible to do the survey.
Okay, sir. So, if I will be interviewing po, okay lang po na pure Tagalog po kami mag-uusap and then
Mm.
itatranslate translate ko na lang po, sir, if ever na ipe-present ko po siya. Oh, okay, sir.
Yes.
Thank you very much po.
Yeah, you can do that. We have what we call thematics, but in this case, since it's Tagalog and then you translate it into English, yes, you can translate it into English, and then you do the thematics. Thematics wherein, because it's a quantitative data that you are trying to process. So thematics will help you identify what are the common terminologies that was given to you, and then you can come up with the answer to that specific question that you have, and then create that one specific theme or probably reason for a specific question that you ask. So that's just one of those techniques that you can use, the thematic analysis. But yes, if it is in Tagalog, you can translate it in English kasi you cannot force naman if they don't know how to speak English, right? So yeah, you can do that. Probably you you read the questionnaire, right? And then it's in English and then translate it, and then the English, I mean, the questionnaire is still in English if it is a survey questionnaire, and probably you can read it to them, translate it, and then give them the option. Yeah, you can do that as well, but you need to be there physically, or someone should know how to interpret it. Para madali na, hindi ka na mahirapan. Nandun na sila pa rin yung sasagot, 'di ba? But you translate it to them so it will be easier.
Okay, sir. Thank you po.
Sure, no problem. Emilio, yes. Emilio?
Yun sir, to follow up lang po yung question earlier ni ni Demi po. Sorry na medyo naglalag ako sir. About the physical and online stores sir. So what if there are people who do not have access to the internet and want to buy your products? So like how will you reach those consumers if you do not have a physical store?
So we have what we call distributors, right? So if they wanted to buy your product but you cannot reach them, then you can have probably a distributor in a specific area. So that's one of the things that you can do. That's another way of strategy, right? The distributors. So there's a lot. Actually, example will be the Avon products. I would say I would see people in our province, meron silang sales representative na nag-iikot sa bahay-bahay. Yan. It's somehow common before, which is an effective way because if you are in an area wherein you don't have access to technology or to the physical store, that you have to travel probably 4 hours, 6 hours just for you to go to the city, then that's gonna be, you bring the product to your consumers, right? As what I mentioned earlier, you develop that specific market if your product is not yet available in that specific market. So instead of them going to your physical store or online, then why not go to that specific area and bring the product to them? Probably you can put up a stall somewhere in that area, or ask someone to be a distributor, right? That can be another way.
Sir. Last
That's based
last
from,
follow-up
that's,
question po,
yeah,
sir. Sorry
go
po.
ahead. That's based from
Um,
my
uh,
personal experience in the
okay.
province. Ah.
Yes,
Yes,
yes
go
po, yes.
ahead.
So kasi po sir, what if your customers are more of the old generation people? So, your target market is the old generation people. So would you recommend to disregard the online stores and establish physical stores and the things that you've said earlier, or is it also good to promote using the online media if your target customers are from the old generation?
Just to give you a background, ha, even old generations, they also have Facebook, they also have TikTok. But yeah, your question is very valid. I would still, from my own perspective, I would still retain my online presence, because my online presence will also help me reach other consumers or customers, probably in some areas in the Philippines. it's not only that the old generations will be the one to buy directly, but there are millennials, probably Generation Z, Generation Alpha, who will buy on behalf of the old generations who doesn't have access to the online. So online presence is still very important, because you wouldn't know who will purchase your product if you're just targeting the old generations. And if the difficulty is with the access with the online store, the probability of you reaching other potential customers is huge because of the power of the internet and social media. So I would still say that you retain that online store for your online presence and for the visibility of your product as well. And it can reach probably international, right? Because you have that website. So who knows, someone from other country would love your product and they will buy potentially in bulk. So you're gonna be the supplier from the Philippines, and it's gonna be with other country as well. So with social media, with the advent of technology, because of the globalization, the potential of the business is unreachable actually. So you wouldn't know, right? So that's how I will say it, or I will approach that scenario that you gave Emilio. So retaining your online presence is also your not just your online presence, but your what do you call this, branding. Yeah, that's also your branding. Yes, ma'am.
To clarify no po, you said kasi the distributor. So parang 'di ba distributor is part of parang marketing channel, no? So sir, puwede pala 'yon na for example sila, not necessarily direct sila sa customer. Puwede pala 'yon na, yung maging channel nila is through distributor. Okay, so ang ganda 'yun, ang gandang idea 'yun ni sir. Tama 'no, wherein yung mga distributor sila na magbebenta ng product.
So hindi ka na mahihirapan dun, ma'am,
Ye
actually.
yes. And ayun nga, sabi ko nga sa kanila, I'm also a part-time teacher. I'm a distributor din sa AXA Philippines. So I was kino-compensate ako through commission. So you can do that also as part of your strategy din po 'no? Sa inyo na puwede rin pala yung gano'ng klase 'no, oo nga naman ano, you give commission 'no, dun sa mga distributor mo. Like yung IM 'no, Sir Irvin, yung mga IM, yung mga nagbebenta ng mga products. So puwede rin yun, okey maging isa sa marketing, channel, tama po ba? We call it
Yep.
marketing channel. Yeah, thank you po. More question pa? Ayan, si Janrev.
Hi sir, good morning po. A question ko po is, since a while ago po na in the topic of demand and supply analysis, you suggested that we can look for articles or website to find the demand or supply. Pero 'di ba po may year kung kailan nagawa or na-publish yung article? Ano po yung year from now that we can still consider? Like, can we still consider an article that was published 5 years ago or 10 years? Like that po.
You have to look into what's the recent publication. Probably past 3 years data, you can look into it if you don't have the last year data. So it's gonna be obsolete if you will look into the past 10 years or 5 years, because probably the demand changed already. Like say for example, the data for the past 5 years may not be, there will be a huge disparity because of what happened because of the pandemic. So now, the data that we have during the pandemic may not be applicable once, we somehow, well, things will not be normal, but once everything will have access, right? So the data that we have right now, 3 years from now, may not be different because the consumer behavior in the market behavior is totally different already. So I suggest if you can get the past 2 to 3 years data, if the data last year is not recent data is not available, I think you can look into that for your data to be valid. In research, usually when it comes to the review of related literature, you have to look into the data 5 to 10 years. But that's for research, a review of related literature. But we're talking about market research in your feasibility study. Eh. So the recent the data, the better. But I would say you really need to get within 2 to 3 years of data.
Okay po sir, thank you po.
Or if the data is not available at all, as what I've said earlier, when it comes to the demand or the supply, then you do your own research for you to get the data. And then you just have to quantify it based from the total population and then the total supply that you have in the market. When you don't have the data for the supply, actually you can ask if your product is about furnitures. So if it is table, ilan ba yung nagpo-purchase ng table every month? So you can ask actually the seller or yung mga promodizer or yung mga nagbebenta, yung mga sales lady, sales man sa mall, you can look into that. Or you say, for example, you can go to a furniture store and then you can ask them, simple as, sir, ask ko lang in a given month, approximately, ilan yung nabibenta nyo? Meron po ba kayong database na pwede naming makita? Or kahit wag nyo na pong ibigay sa amin, just an estimate po. You can talk to the manager or supervisor and they can give you that idea already. Pagka sinabi nila na we are able to sell probably 20 every month, okay, 20, so i-times mo yan sa 12, di ba? Nasa ilan na yan? 240 in a given year yung nabebenta nila. So that's gonna be your basis for the supply or the supply, which is also recent data that you can give or you can use in your feasibility study. So you just have to be creative because not all the data will be available in the internet, to be honest.
Okay po sir, thank you po.
No problem.
So, are there any more questions po ba?
Guys, this is really a good session. Thank you for your questions. I actually am enjoying it more than my talk, answering all your questions. So I hope I was able to share all my knowledge and expertise based on your questions and then the discussion. But those are really good questions.
Alright, I guess yun na lang po siguro yung mga questions ng iba. But anyway, thank you po for that insightful talk and the healthy conversation of each question asked by our fellow classmates. And thank you po, Mr. Perono, for discussing about the feasibility study of market research methodology and market analysis. Personally, I think this is very important to know today as students, especially that once we begin to sell a product or service, this would bring a lot of help to us to understand or analyze the market potential of it.
In addition to that, po, we also learned that market research is important to identify the potential market, competition, development, and also the potential supply and demand of the product. You've also given us tips on how to get the data, which will be extremely helpful for us in the future. And now that we have shared our part, let's hear from our Kapwa ABM what they have learned from Mr. Irvin's discussion. Can we ask at least two people to share their key takeaways and conclusions? Ayan, you can raise hands naman, guys. Yan, since no one is raising their hands, we'll call na lang, no? Sino
O
kaya? Let's pick.
bolunturo,
Mag-volunturo
Wala
tayo.
pala
Sino yung
mag-raise
pwede?
hand. Joke lang.
Ayan. Miss Hibunada, can you share your key takeaways, key points of what you've learned?
Hello, ayan na. Ayan. Ayan. Ang dami ko pong, first of all, thank you, Sir Perono. Ako po talaga nagno-notes habang nag-aano kayo. habang nagdi-discuss kayo, sir. Uh, uh, keynotes ko, sir, is very relevant po yung diniscuss nyo din kasi also in line din po siya sa amin sa research namin ngayon. So, uh, I think one of my key takeaways is the importance of checking and reflecting on the feasibility po ng study and the yung study na mga conduct po namin and how to uh, self-assess din po for the business na plano naming uh, ipatupad po sa NTREP namin, sir. So, ayun po.
And is there anyone else who would want to share their takeaways? And go, Miss Erica.
Hi, sir. Thank you ulit. Thank you din po for this session. Yung key takeaways ko naman po is, of course, sa feasibility study, up until kanina, parang napapaisip po ako, bakit kailangan po ng feasibility? I mean, I know na important siya, pero parang ang hassle lang po sa akin, gano'n. So, nung binigay niyo na po yung reasons why we need to conduct a feasibility study, do'n po ako na-convince na, super important nga po siya. And then, super duper helpful po yung sinend niyo po yung how we can get the sample size. Kasi kailangan din po namin yun ngayon sa research since nasabi din po ni Yvonne yun. And then kanina po nagtatanong kami sa GC, sabi, ano ulit yung sinabi ni sir? Anong website yun? Parang ganun, sir. Tapos, next po yung pinaka-highlight naman po for me is of course the market survey analysis. Andito po yung halos lahat po ng tanong namin kanina related din po sa market survey analysis na need po namin malaman yung population, saan po yung location na maganda, and then of course the market segment and market survey. And then helpful din po yung demand and supply analysis and demand projection approach po. For me, I think those are the key takeaways po talaga.
Sir, pwede ba mag-follow-up question?
Yes po, ma'am.
Dahil po ito na po yung magiging output nila, so I will be asking, sir, yung minimum, sa tingin nyo, minimum number of questions na pwede nilang i-generate in
Actually, yeah, they have to use the guide that I gave earlier. I sent you, ma'am, the PowerPoint presentation. Remember, there are the sub-variables and then the demographics, and then yung apat na important na variables that should be there. Kasi those will be your guide for you to be able to come up with the demand supply analysis. Yan, yun yung pinaka-importante, yung market share mo, paano mo makuha. Actually, there is another part, supposedly yung sa computation part, kung paano nyo gagawin. Kaso nilimit ko lang dun yung talk ko, kinondense ko na siya. But I can help you and then find an example on how to solve an example in solving the demand analysis or the supply and demand analysis. Yeah. So, sundan lang nila yun, ma'am, yung mga variables, key variables that I added or put there. More or less, yun na yung key or important questions that they should be putting in their feasibility study. I'll try to get a sample questionnaire po para meron po kayong reference.
Yan. Thank you very much po. Yan, para gumaangga-ang ang kanilang buhay.
I'll try to send po a sample
Yeah.
questionnaire. So
At
at least
least
you can use
to,
it as their reference.
yan. Yes po. For kahit basic lang po para kapag nag-college na po sila, doon naman nila yan na thoroughly mapag-aaralan pag nag-college na sila. Thank you very
Mhm.
much po.
No problem.
Thank you for openly sharing your takeaways from the whole talk, Ma'am N.A., Sir Erica, and Yvonne, and the whole rest of ABM. Now that we've heard what some of us have learned, we would like to call on Ma'am N.A. for the presenting of the certificate. Please allow our group to present our certificate for Mr. Perono.
Ayan, sir, may certificate kami, sir. So, okay, to show you our gratitude to, we would like to present you with a certificate of appreciation. Okay, please show po. Actually, Sir Kelvin, pwede po ba mag-ask? Gusto ko pong para malaman din namin itong iyong mga titles behind, no? So, yan. Later po, no? So, we are offering this certificate from the Basic Senior High School, award this certificate of appreciation to Mr. Irvin R. Perono, CSSYB, DBA, SPBE. Mamaya, sir, ha, explain nyo ano po ba yan para ma-inspire din kami to become one, no? For sharing his valuable time and expertise as a guest lecturer for the Basic Education Senior High School culminating activity for the school year 2021 to 2022. Given this fifth sorry po, hindi napalitan ng date. Given this 23rd of February 2022 at Trinity University of Asia, Quezon City. Ayan, edit na lang natin. Signed by Miss Herminia Borja, our assistant to the principal, our principal, Mr. Julius D. Somera, and Vice President for Academic Affairs, Dr. Howell Ho. Thank you very much po. Ayan. Sir Irvin, ano po yung meaning nun, sir?
So, actually, hindi ko siya ginagamit yung ano, pero nasa signature ko pa. CSSYB, that Certified Six Sigma Yellow Belt. Yeah, DBA is Doctor of Business Administration. And then the SPBE is the Senior Professional for Business Education.
Education. Okay. Ayan. Soon, no? Magiging ganyan din po isa sa ating mga students.
Looking forward to that, ma'am.
Six Sigma pa. Sir, ayan, para okay lang po ba mag-share kayo ano ba yung Six Sigma para ma-idea din sila kung ano yung Six Sigma na yan?
Yeah, Six Sigma, it's more on process improvement. So lean methodology, so that's part of it. So Six Sigma is part of TQM, Total Quality Management. I'm sure you've encountered that already. So it's really more on process improvement. How are you going to make the process efficient for you, save cost, time probably. Yeah.
Yes. So yun, sir, thank you very much po no for extending your time to us. Very
No
helpful
problem
po,
po,
very
ma'am.
valuable to us po yun. Thank you very much, sir. Ayan. Next, anong picture tayo? Pa-picture?
Okay po.
Para meron tayong ah, Calvin, ano po yung screen para screenshot. Yan. Ay, dapat pala tanggalin yan para makita yung yon. Yan. Please open your camera. Para pag kami po ay nagpa-accredit sa inyo ng Six Sigma, sir ha, bigyan nyo kaming discount. Yan, bibigyan tayo ng connection ni sir para maging Six Sigma rin tayo sa future, certified. Yan, open po your camera. Yan, okay na. Jane John Lester, open po. Okay, ayan. Si Miguel, si Jerome. Ayan. Kasya naman lahat ano? Kasi 30s lang tayo. Yan. Okay? Okay. Tingin na po. Titingin na po ba sa camera? Okay. 1, 2, 3. Sino magpipicture dyan? Isa pa? Isa pa? Roy? Isa pa. Wala kang mic, be.
Si Dasha po yung magpipicture.
Okay. Sige, Dasha, bilang 1, 2, 3. Okay, okay na? Hindi nagsasalita. Ayun, thank you very much, Sir Irvin. We'll send you na lang our feedback po para po for improvement. Pero anyway, sir, sobrang totally perfect. We learned so much po. As in. Thank you very much po. Sa
It's
uulitin, Sir Irvin, wag po ano.